David Fowley, you turned me on to a movie called The Old Oak, which is now, I believe it's in limited release. Is that correct? You have all the information. Tell us about where can people see The Old Oak?
So it is in limited release. You'll probably see it at like a fine arts theater or something. It was playing here at the Siskel Center in Chicago. I don't know if it ever made its way to the music box. I am trying to get it to go to the After Hours Film Society. Um, yeah, it's one of those that has been on the festival circuit for a while. Now it's finally getting a limited release in the States.
And this is director Ken Loach's final film, and I know there's been a lot made of that because he's a pretty legendary director. I confess, this is the first time I've seen a Ken Loach movie.
hmm I it's one of the reasons why I wanted you to see it because I have a limited experience with Ken Loach's films, and I'm a little embarrassed by it because he's the kind of director who would kind of be my jam, and I just he's a blind spot for me. So I'm like, well, let's start with his last one. I've seen bits of I Daniel Blake, but not the whole thing. So that's on Criterion. Sorry We Missed You came out in like I think 2019. Yeah, which is his last movie before this. So Old Oak at 87 years old is supposedly his last film, and it seems to be somewhat of a culmination of the topics that he's used to directing and presenting to audiences, along with his kind of like very frequent screenwriting collaborator, Paul Laverty, however you choose. So yeah, I feel like, man, I want to go into the back catalog and watch more of his movies. But yeah, the reason why I brought this up is that I feel like we don't get a whole lot of movies like this, and I feel like we are kind of bombarded with movies that are IP genre movies, um, kind of buzzworthy award season type movies, and then there's this one, which I feel is important, and it could be sentimental, but it's almost like sentimental in all the right ways. And I feel like it struck me because you don't often see a movie that's not too heavy-handed with themes that are so strong related to like hope and kindness. Um, that's to me how I summed up Old Oak. I mean, we'll get into the story of it all, but um, again, I don't know how you might have felt about it, so I'm sure you'll share that. But um, yeah,
You messaged me about this. You said this is right now your favorite film of 2024.
yeah,
That's very high praise.
yeah. I
And
figured that
it's
get your attention. So
well, it did. And it's nice to see, and a lot of times this happens. Like I know we talk about like the Chicago Critics Film Festival is coming up,
hmm
and I think you have said before that it's at that festival that you tend to see like at least a couple of movies that end up making it to your year end list.
yep,
So it's great that that's kind of not fair because a lot of those movies were found by the team at other film festivals and brought to Chicago as like, hey, you don't have to travel out of town to like
right.
Colorado to see these movies.
hmm
Um, and you get to see them before award season, but it's nice to see films outside of award season, all throughout the year.
Yeah,
You can
outside
say,
of a
I
film festival. Yeah,
right. So it's not like this pressure, like, oh, everyone's talking about this in September, October, November, so it's got to go on a list. These are the kinds of things you can discover them, and they can stay with you. And you really, if you hang on to them to the end of the year, then it really is, you know, kind of a true top of the year film instead of what
hmm
everyone's talking about, right?
right.
Um, yeah, I like a lot about the Old Oak, but I don't like this movie. And I think a lot of it is because it's you said it's sentimental in all the right ways. I would say it's overly sentimental to the point of being simplistic with regards to a lot of very complex issues, and it touches on a lot of those issues, but then kind of pulls back and doesn't explore it. Now, I understand this isn't a political thriller or a political drama. It's like it's a neighborhood, kind of like fish out of water almost story about prejudice and things like that. But yeah, I pay attention to a lot of news and a lot of coverage of what's going on with regards to the issues this movie covers. And I just found it like kind of lacking. It's nice, I think, if you're not immersed in that stuff. If
Mhm.
you are, then I think there's gonna be a lot of questions that you might have. So it's weird because I thought this would be a perfect like PG-13 movie about tolerance that you could show to kids, but there's way too many F bombs and expletives all the way throughout for it to be appropriate to that. But yeah, I'm watching it and like, well, yeah, that's nice and everything, but let's step back for a second.
Mm. The
David,
Old Oak.
what is the old oak and what is it about?
So the Old Oak takes place in 2016. It was made in the past couple of years, but um, it's basically about a small former mining town in northern England, and the Old Oak, the titular title, it's basically a bar, a tavern that's been around forever, and it's run by a guy named T.J. Ballantyne, and he is also involved in. He's kind of a guy who keeps to himself, but he's also involved in helping out his friend. I think her name is Linda, who is involved in providing, um, well, providing provisions for Syrian refugees who have, in the beginning of the movie, just been unloaded from a bus. Um, and now, grant you, it's not like a ramshackle bus. It's a nice. It's like a touring bus, kind of. Then they get dropped off, um, and despite the hesitancy and the kind of uh, vitriol that a lot of the regulars of the tavern and some of the neighbors in the community have been, receptive, to the reaction of these Syrian refugees coming to find a new place to live. TJ's, you know, doing his best to lend a hand wherever he can, you know, and he kind of gets develops this friendship with a young woman who is from the bus, another Syrian refugee who is keen on photography. She's got a talent for photography, and they kind of form a bond that you know um, is kind of ruffling the feathers of the local taverns because of basically them coming into the neighborhood is controversial because they are receiving free clothes, bedding, everything that's
Bicycles, yeah, for the kids.
bicycles, and the criticism is TJ and Lindo, why can't you help out your own, you know, and they have a point. And so I guess what I like about the movie is that it kind of I feel like it takes these topics and concerns that we normally see, and I feel like it just kind of leans in closer and says, this is who these people are, and not and by people I mean all sides, the local um, citizens of the community. They have their perspective, and you know, they're I feel like the screenwriter and the director here they're giving all sides equal screen time, and I feel like there's enough to not think of really anybody as the antagonist, the protagonist. Let's just look at everybody and look at their sides. Yes, there's a little bit more focus on TJ and the young woman who
Yara.
is Yara, played by Ebla Mari, who I think is really great in it. her first time performance. Um,
This is her first film.
I believe, yeah, ever.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I like
yeah,
her and Dave Turner, who plays,
hmm
TJ. I mean,
yeah,
they've got this great
chemistry.
chem
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's chemistry, but it's not chemistry in the way that you usually think of, like, the leading man, leading woman. Like, they have a great, burgeoning friendship, throughout the
yeah,
film, and they really do need each other, and I think that was the strongest element of the movie. They were great.
yeah. I think what sets TJ apart from all his other, peers, except for
He's
maybe
not a
Linda.
dick.
Yeah, he's a kind guy,
Yeah.
who has, like, some of his patrons. I think all of them have experienced loss, grief, um, successes, setbacks, all of that thing. But instead of complaining about them, um, TJ just kind of keeps going on, keeps to himself, but also wants to give back somehow. And he's interested in, um, being of service to others. And that's as the movie goes on. I mean, we do learn a little bit more about him, but it's nothing like. Again, it's I appreciate how he's kind of, I wouldn't say overcome the hardships that he's experienced in the past, but he's still moving forward. And instead of always, like I said, complaining like so many of his patrons about this and that, blaming or shaming or whatever. He just kind of, he's the kind of bartender who has no stance on anything. And what I appreciate about as the movie goes on is after a while, I think he realizes that, and he kind of, maybe not as much as I would like, but after a while, he just kind of says like, this isn't right, you know, and I need to do something, um, even more. So there's this back room in the old oak that used to be used for a lot more community gatherings,
Mhm.
and it has some great old black and white photos of when the mining was thriving in the town, and when people were just more there for each other. Um, and that was kind of in his family, and he has since closed it off and even stopped covering it under his insurance, because he just closed it off. It's like a relic. The doors stay closed, but there's it's opened up, and cleaned up and used for providing free food and drink food to the community. And by the community, the goal is, between him and Linda, the goal is to basically provide a place for the people who are natives to the community and those who are recent, transplants from Syria. That the common ground could be that everybody can break bread together and you know um, come to find that they have a lot in common. And
Mhm.
yeah, to me, it sounds whatever, cheesy or whatever, or, all that. But I just felt like, gosh, it's great to have a movie like this that has that goal. Now, the movie uh, doesn't wrap up where everybody's, holding hands and sunshine and rainbows. Yeah, okay,
Well, I mean, for the most part, it does. I mean,
kinda. I mean, basically, the back room gets closed down due to a technical problem that you know. eh, Well, it was more of a sabotage
yeah.
from the community, and it was unfortunate. And that is never, I think, in a more uplifting movie, all of that could have been resolved by the end of the movie. And it's like, oh, we're back up, and yeah, things are great. Punch the credits. But here, there's no, it's way too expensive to continue this back room of fellowship, and it just kind of ends, with, there's hope for the community, but who knows, so I just really appreciated the characterization and the the time that Loach and Laverty are taking with just conversations that um, TJ's having with Yari, but also Yara and a lot of other people there. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is this film is full of really nice moments,
Hmm.
compelling exchanges between characters. But you know, you talked about characterizations. I was thinking about this after the movie was over. This film has a magical Negro problem,
Hmm.
which is, they're magical Syrians. These aren't people. I mean, they are one dimensional. They are every one of them is pure of heart. They have no flaws. They are the noble refugees who move into the neighborhood and are attacked for what they are. They help people come together and realize that people are people and all of that. But there's not, I mean, the townspeople get all of the dimension. They have all of the
Hmm.
perks and all of the flaws. You know, it would have been interesting to see because what this film doesn't really get down to is the problem of the clash of cultures, right? One of the reasons, and they sort of talk about this in some of the bar talk in the beginning about like, can she even come in here because we serve alcohol here because the Syrians they're a Muslim family and a Muslim culture, and there is a lot of ignorance that's being spewed by these people. But the
Hmm.
problem is there's also a lot of really good questions and concerns about migration, legal, illegal, that the UK has been dealing with since Tony Blair threw open the floodgates back in 1997.
Yeah.
I think it's telling that this movie is set in 2016 because it seems almost like a wag in the face, like, aren't you ashamed you voted for Brexit now because look how everything worked out, kind of a polemic on the part of
Hmm.
Ken Loach and the writer. And, it's easy to say that, but then you look several years later on, immigration into the UK last year was like 740,000 people, and that was last year. And there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of uproar, there's a lot of people not getting along culturally. And for this movie to come out and say, yes, here's an example of the perfect Syrian family that comes into this town and they have no issues with anybody, everyone just has issues with them. Imagine if, you know, uh, let's say TJ had a young bar person working for him who was gay. What would that relationship have been like with the Syrian family that moves in? Famously, there are cultural differences between people, and none of that is explored here. There are a couple of movies that I was thinking about while watching this,
Hmm.
I think do a much better job. One was Blinded by the Light, which came out a few years ago. That took place in, I think, 83. And that also dealt with a teen Pakistani boy who was called every name in the book. And, but he was obsessed with like American culture and Bruce Springsteen. And then another film came out last year. It was an Indian film called Dunki, which is like this 3-hour sprawling epic about uh, people migrating from India to Britain and back again, and all of they confronted the cultural problems and the disillusionment of going from one terrible war torn area to a place where they had been told, oh, everything is freedom and they're going to help you here, and it turns out not to be the case. This is the sunshine and rainbows version of the immigration story, which is fine,
Hmm.
but I'm watching it thinking, this feels like a fairy tale, and I don't appreciate it. I liked the elements of it that I felt were heartfelt, but I just think overall the movie isn't honest. It felt like it was almost like a Michael Moore drama or something.
Wow. Okay. I think Michael Moore would be a little bit more taking to a certain side, but
Oh,
uh,
it's very obvious what side Ken Loach is on here. Let's not, I mean, all of the people in the pub, with the exception of one person who says one thing that doesn't quite go along with the rest of the group, and he ends up kind of siding with the the noble villagers and the Syrians at the end. You kind of see him in the background,
mhm.
and TJ. Everybody else is like vile and ignorant, and they never become more than that throughout the course of the film. There's no growth there. They are as one dimensional in the negative sense as the Syrians are in the positive sense. They're cartoon characters, very well drawn and very well performed cartoon characters, but
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I didn't mind that. I feel like it gives us time to really kind of feel like, oh, we were experiencing very like, lived in characters, and they seem, um, I feel like the way they're cast and the way they're written, I feel like they are, to me, um, fully dimensional, but they're not. Yes, they're not showing. I hear what you're saying. They are kind of one note, but I still feel like they are, um, fully developed characters, just because these are people who have not changed, and these are people who are, complaining about the changes that they see, and they are victims of problems that have been going on in the government in the community well before a bus arrived with Syrian refugees. So,
Right. They
yeah.
have some great parallels going back to minors
Mhm.
minors issues back decades before, and there is some great history that's painted there, specifically through the photographs. I think one of the best scenes of the film is it happens early on when TJ and Yara are looking at
Yeah.
those pictures and kind of drawing the parallels between their kind of cultures and their struggles, and the beauty of the pictures, and as you mentioned, the food kind of being the common denominator to bring people together. um, but there's also these kind of, when I talk about fairy tales, when they do open up that back room and start serving food to the community, this person says to TJ, I think it was a little boy, says,
Yeah.
or maybe it was the girl, like, "Oh, are we going to do this all the time?" And he says, "Yes, twice a week with a special on Saturdays." I'm thinking, where the hell are you getting all this money and resources to feed this community twice a week and once on Saturdays? The movie itself is very inconsistent as to the geography of this town, because for most of the first part of it, it feels abandoned. They shut down the church. That's why they can't have any, gatherings there. There's no business. Everybody spends all their time like day drinking. I don't know if it's like pension money or whatever.
Mm.
But then you come to the last shot of the film where it's this kumbaya, huge march through a very bustling street with businesses and all the colors of the rainbow carrying banners. I'm like, where the hell is this town? I think it's supposed to be the same town, but this town changes identities frequently throughout the film based on the needs of what the screenplay needs it to have said about it at the time.
Yeah, I feel like it's on the outskirts of a more thriving town, not like a major city, but more of a thriving town. And like, even when TJ offers to repair Yara's 35 millimeter camera, he's like, "There's a place in town, that I
Yeah.
can take it to." So I'm imagining that this is more of a neighborhoody, place, opposed to like a town where shops are thriving and everything. It's more around that. And what we see at the end parading, I don't think that that's near the old oak, because they're carrying that banner that they made.
Hmm.
And there's other banners that people are holding up, and I was under the impression that they're all coming from different neighborhoods to this main town. I don't know what that main town is, but yeah.
Right. And my question is, do the people in this main town know what's going on and whatever is happening in the old Oak town? And how do they feel about a giant, like, Syrian procession coming through, waving these giant banners through their street? Like, there's all these questions that I have about the politics, the relationships between these communities, because if you're right, and there is a middle class or more well affluent town right next to this poor mining town, what's that relationship like? What are the
Right.
attitudes of the people in that community? What the hell is going on here? I have no sense of the time or place.
Yeah, and I mean, we know the time, it's 2016, but as far as
No,
the
but I mean, like, but what I'm saying is the other, like, time in terms of like the relationship of like the end of this film before the parade and the parade. Is that the next day? There
yeah, I mean,
also, before leading up to that, I know we're getting into spoilers and everything, but I want to talk to you about this movie.
yeah.
Uh, there's a scene where TJ, who he's kind of squishy and a little bit dim in parts because he's a fence sitter. He is admittedly, he doesn't like to get into the middle of things, which ultimately gets him in trouble because he keeps trying to appeal to both sides.
Mhm.
Now, when this young lad comes in and says, "Yeah, that electrical problem that you had with the flooding that kind of inadvertently led to the electrical problem that ruined the back room where everyone was having these
In the
meals.
kitchen, yeah.
Yeah, that was sabotage. That was not happenstance. It was my uncle and his friends, the regular bigots that we've seen hanging out in the old
Hmm.
oak this whole time. They did that. And he says, "Look, I'm telling you this. You can't tell anybody. This is confidence, or else they're going to beat the crap out of me, essentially." Uh, TJ says, "Okay, you can count on me." Cut to another scene where he's sitting there talking to Yara and Linda and somebody else, and they're like talking about, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" And then TJ says, "Yeah, this is a real betrayal." And they're like, "Wait, what do you mean a betrayal?" He's like, "Well, it's not right what they did." What are you talking about? And he's like holding it in, but I'm like, "You idiot, what are you even doing?" And finally, the way he gets out of this conundrum that he's set up for himself is he tells everyone, "Go fuck off," and he like leaves. And then we see him walking on the beach. And it is assumed because he starts walking into the sea that he is going to possibly finish the act that we learn he had started years ago when he was going to kill himself after his wife left him and his son. We never hear anything more about his son except they're estranged.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Fine. I'll leave that. That's like dangling thread 52. But he goes off into the ocean. Linda comes running down the beach saying, "TJ, TJ," because she has no idea what's going on. It's like, uh, Yara's dad died.
Hmm.
And that snaps him out of it. And then he goes to Yara's house to offer condolences. And then it's a wonderful life. The entire neighborhood shows up. Okay, TJ leaves the bar, goes to the beach. Linda comes, says Yara's dad died. They go to Yara's place. This is all very close geography, we can assume.
Hmm.
When did people go knocking on doors saying, "Hey, Yara's dad died"? Who? Oh, that's the Syrian girl with the camera, I guess. Let's go buy out the local florist. Let's make cards. Let's all take time off of work unless it's a Saturday, but I guess we're all unemployed, so what the hell? And like almost 100 people show up outside this door. And I'm like, I don't know what this movie is anymore.
This is after all of those moments of we would assume weeks of free food where all of the Syrians and the locals were getting together and you know, coming to terms with, yes, we're all alike and we have a lot of similarities, where they have developed a bond. They have developed at least a respect, a friendship. And so, I wasn't too surprised by that. Yes, it seemed a little
There's a difference though between you need a couple hours, David.
okay.
It can't be
Okay.
like it's a half hour after I left this room and now I'm back at Yara's house because your dad's dead. Let's give it an hour. People have things to do. On top of that, this gets back to another inconsistency with this town because the town looks dead. I don't when I'm seeing the people in the salon, there's the salon scene, which is very
Hmm.
lovely, and then the people at at the dinners that they're setting up or the lunches, I've never seen these people around town. It's like the town felt like a ghost town when we first kind of encountered it. There's a few local people, maybe there's a high school, but I'm like, where are all these people coming from? I don't know. And how big is this Syrian community? Because at one point, when the film opens, you almost get the impression that Yara and her family are like the first people to move into this area. They've heard about other folks moving
Hmm.
in. There's a big deal about the company that owns a lot of the estates, kind of like renting them out to a
Yeah.
bunch of like,
Airbnbs.
losers and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But then later on in the film, it turns out there's a whole community of Syrian people here, but I don't see them interacting with Yara's family really. Like, what are those relationships like? How is that knitting together? This movie should be like a mini series to flesh all this out, or it should be 3 hours long, or it needs a couple more drafts of the screenplay to tell a real story that can address all of these issues for people who are thinking about it other than just getting wrapped up in the drama. Those other films I mentioned, Dunkey is 3 hours long, and Blinded by the Light is not really about that issue, but it addresses it in a way that you get a sense of what was going on at the time. And that's what's so frustrating about The Old Oak.
Hmm.
Simply from simply from my problem, I just want to stress my problem with this movie is only to do with the screenplay. I love the performances.
Hmm.
I think the setting's great, and it's so naturalistic as to it's not documentary like. That's not necessarily thing you can throw at this, but it's the closest to documentary that you're going to get from a drama. It's really sharp, and that's why I was so frustrated by the movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I really liked about it, and the things that you just listed and appreciated about it was enough for me to push it over any type of, let's say, screenwriting flaws or fleshing out. Um, I I appreciated the economy of the storytelling, and I think that that's what you did not like. Um, and I guess I just to see um kindness reciprocated, and um you know uh, leaving things on a hopeful note, and even just maybe even reconsidering, like there's that moment where there's a great moment between TJ and Linda when they're delivering things, and they just got done delivering a bike to a Syrian girl who was not part of Yara's community at all, or not part of Yara's family at all. But there was some like three local boys who were like, "Man, I'd like a bike," and he really has no quick answer for that. And well, later on they're kind of still driving together, and he's like, TJ's kind of like, "You should do something for the locals," and she took offense to that because like, look, I, this is what I'm doing for the people who are coming into our community. I would love to do something for the locals, but I have my own children. I'm doing this, this, and this, and this. And he's like, oh. And she's like, why don't you do something? You used to coach the teams. You used to do this. You used to do that. And I feel like there's definitely he realizes there's definitely more that he can do, and that's one of the catalysts for him saying, I'm going to open up the back room, and because he does want to do more, and it realizes instead of saying, "Hey, you should do this," it should be him. If you, it's more of like a see something, do something. If you see a need, then meet that need, and that's what he kind of. Obviously, Linda helps him with that conviction, but he kind of sets off to do
See, I was offended by Linda's offense,
that. Okay.
because here's the thing, like, yeah, she is helping out these Syrian refugees, and that's very fine and noble, but there has to be a better answer than, yeah, I'm helping out these people who are coming into the country. I'm not doing anything to really help the community or address
Hmm.
their concerns with the work that I'm doing. Now, maybe that's not her responsibility, but I think it is sort of the responsibility of the film to take a better stance than, oh, that's kind of a bigoted thing to say. Why don't you do something? Like, lady, I am barely hanging on. Like, I'm depressed. I'm running this tavern. My service to the community is giving these guys a place to gather and vent so they don't end up like committing hate crimes or killing themselves.
Hmm.
It's just, again, it felt like that whole thing could have been several scenes or its own movie, what have you. The other problem, and this drove me nuts because I was waiting for there to be some reason as to why they didn't do this in the first place until Yara says it towards the end of the film. Again, magical Negroing her way through the solutions to help all of her more dim witted counterparts. When she says, well, why don't you just use the old oak for the gathering place? And I was wondering that from the beginning. Like, TJ's saying, oh, there's this back room, the electrical wiring's crap, the kitchen doesn't work, all this other stuff. I'm like, well, just use your giant bar. What's the problem?
Well,
And they end up
yeah,
doing that.
yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you could have done that from square one and saved yourself a lot of headache.
The one of the problems that I had with TJ is that he didn't have the balls enough to say what he was feeling early on, because one of his longtime friends, who's a frequent patron there, he was so upset about all the Syrians coming in that he wanted to uh, basically get the community together and do a kind of like town hall thing where they're complaining and figuring out, well, what are we going to do about these Syrians? What are we going to do? All this stuff, and people are these companies are coming in and buying out our flats next to us on the street and everything, and so just to have like a big huge event session for a town hall.
Which rightfully, I think later in the film, someone, I think it was it Vic? he was the guy who looked like a ginger Peter Capaldi. He was kind of the ringleader guy.
Yeah.
He was like
Yeah.
raising hell about it, and then
Yeah.
someone said, "I'm kind of glad we didn't have that meeting because I think you just invite a lot of racists in."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a magnet for all the xenophobes in the area.
True.
Which,
And I think that's one of the
yeah,
reasons why TJ didn't want to do it, but he didn't have the balls enough to say, you know what? I'm only going to open up that room if it's something I can support. And I can't support you guys coming in there and complaining about people who are leaving a war torn area and wanting to start afresh. Um, it, you know, we can make it productive, sure, but it sounds like it would just be like you said, a gripe fest and a right winging, a hand wringing, time.
you could have drawn a nice parallel to, Europe has a bad history of, angry people with race issues getting together in bars, because that would have been a direct reference to, Der Fuhrer and how he kind of started out.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
but
but he
yeah,
does, yeah, but he does open it up for something that he wants to back and support, and he has that right because that's his place. But
right. But I'm just talking
yeah,
about like the venue. Like, why didn't
sure,
he think to do that until, because and honestly, like all the other people around him, no one was like, we could just use this place until, again, I think it was Yara at the end said, well, we just use the old oak. And like,
right.
oh wow, that's so amazing. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There is a lot, I think, around this movie to recommend, but not quite the full experience. I will say something that was kind of upsetting to me,
Mm,
um, was the banner.
mm,
It's a nice sentiment.
mhm,
There's a giant meeting where they're showing, like, they've kind of turned the room into a screening room. There's a guy kind of playing, I guess, Syrian music from the home country,
mhm,
and like an entire like nice mix of the different communities watching Yara's still photography as she's been capturing what she's seen while she
yeah,
spent time in the town.
yeah,
And it's a very lovely moment.
mhm.
And then there's a big surprise. They bring in this giant banner. Again, I don't know when, how, who made this damn thing,
Mm,
because I'm
mm.
like, this looks like it took years to make, but they have a giant banner. I think, doesn't it say the old oak on it or something, or it's some
There's
reference.
an oak tree on it, but then it says what were the words on it? It said
I'll tell you exactly what the words are, because this is what really kind of pissed me off. Where is it?
solidarity.
Strength, solidarity, resistance. Now, these are flat out communist ideas here, right? Because there's a very much an anti-corporate, anti-capitalist, pro-worker. In fact, I think they all say, like, if the workers stood up and united, I'm like, oh, you mean workers of the world unite? Where have we heard that before? Instead of resistance, because that is also on the banner that they parade through the town at the end, resist what? Do you
Yeah,
want to make a movie where these communities do stand up against the governments and the businesses that have been persecuting them? And instead of complaining about it, they like literally take it to the streets? But no, they don't. What that word should have been: resilience, because
resilience.
that's the theme running through this movie until it
Hmm.
turns into this weird, like, wait, what, resistance? What? No, no, no.
Yeah, it should have
We just want
been.
to get along.
Yeah, it should have been either resilience or acceptance or something like that.
Yes.
Um, yeah,
Acceptance, that would have been nice too. Solidarity, resilience, acceptance.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah. Well, yeah,
It's the
uh,
movie that it is, so I'm not sitting here rewriting the works of the great Ken Loach, but I and I don't want this to come off like I'm never gonna watch Ken Loach movies again. I had the same kind of problem with, strangely, Terrence Malick and Jean-Luc Godard, where I started off with, uh the later Malick films, which I didn't think were any good until I revisited after I'd gone back and watched his earlier stuff. And I think my first Godard film was Goodbye to Language.
oh boy,
Oh boy, yeah. And I was
big
like,
difference.
who is this guy? But
Yeah.
yeah, now I'm like Alphaville, and wow.
Hmm.
So I will go back and open up Mr. Loach's filmography. Hey, maybe even with you, David, because it sounds like we want to take a similar
Yeah,
journey.
that's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate him as a filmmaker. This one just didn't strike me.
Loaching through the years. Um,
Oh no.
uh, yeah, there's definitely some movies from like the late '70s. Like there's one with Terrence Malick that I want to catch up with. Uh, The Wind That Shakes the Barleys with Cillian Murphy. Um, yeah, I see. I mean, I definitely like this kind of proletarian kind of focus of working class um, UK folk. Um, and I would imagine he has in his decades as a director taken certain stances, and he's kind of known for that. So, I don't mind that. Is he like, say, the British, Robert Altman? I mean, maybe not. I don't know. But he's definitely a director that I want to catch up with. So I'm interested in going through the back catalog.
Yeah. Well, I've been having a good time going through this movie with you. I know it might not seem like it, but even movies that I don't particularly care for, movies that I do care for, but I'm frustrated by. Maybe that's a better way to put it. I like talking those out with you. This is movie therapy, and
Yeah,
I love that you love this movie, and I can understand why it kind of
yeah.
enraptured you. It just didn't have that same effect
I
on me. But
I was fine with the simplicity of it. You were not. I get that.
right,
And I thought it was a very, like you said, that the two leads were fantastic. Dave Turner and what's her name? Ebla Mari. Impressive first time performance. Um, and of course, I'm a soft spot for when movies have some type of
I knew it. I
I
thought
know,
about this.
I know,
The dogs.
the dogs. Yeah, whenever something tragic happens to dog, and the thing is that his we learn like how he finds the dog and how the dog finds him, and how really the dog is becomes this special relationship to him. Um, and as soon as they introduce those big furious dogs across the street that these young hooligans are trying everything they can to hold them back on their leash, that's going to play out later on. Yeah, you just know it. But yeah.
The one thing I was very glad about, because I was, like, rolling my eyes like, "Oh, I wonder if we're gonna see these characters again with their dogs." The one thing I was happy about was I was convinced that they were going to sick these dogs on, like, some of,
Oh,
like, Yara's
refugees.
family or friends. Yeah, I'm like,
Gosh,
"Oh, no,
that would have
this is
been
not gonna be
terrible.
good."
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know if Loach really does that, goes in that direction, but um yeah, I mean, everything. I'd be curious to see where this was shot, because everything about the locations felt like very real and authentic. And there's certain towns that just haven't really changed that much in the UK. And so this could have been. I mean, it was established early on that it was 2016, but it could have been decades ago. It could have been current. It's just it. Some things are just, they don't change. They stay stuck in time, and sometimes that's the mentality too.
well, and I think that's one of the I wonder what would happen if you were to try and make this movie set in 2023 or 2024.
Hmm.
I think you would have a much harder time getting this particular message across, because the sheer numbers that are pouring into the UK, it's sort of
Mhm.
like what we're seeing over here in the States. Um, you know, they're like, if you were to make the American version of this film, it would have been a fantasy about, I think, when Ron DeSantis shipped the or bust those migrants over to Martha's Vineyard a year or
Mhm,
two ago,
mhm, mhm.
and it was a big news story, like, "How could you do this to these, treating people like political pawns?"
Or the Texas
But
governor shipping them all up to Chicago. Yeah.
right, but here's the thing. Those problems with the numbers growing and growing and growing year after year of these border towns, no one paid attention until they started coming to other parts of the country. And the governors of those states said, look, you won't listen to us. Here's a taste of what we're dealing with every day. And people like, oh my God, we've got 72 people showing up on Martha's Vineyard. What are we going to do? Whereas you've got people in Texas and other places saying 72 oh, we have 7,200 crossings this afternoon. Now, you look at the Martha's Vineyard version of it, and you could say, oh, well, these terribly affluent people with all the resources in the world, they welcome in these refugees and give them homes and say, oh, we're going to help you set up your new life here in America. That would be, I imagine, the version Ken Loach would like to say. If you look what actually happened, these people were back on the bus within 24 hours. The Martha's Vineyard folks were saying, not in my backyard. And they went on being good little liberals and sending these people off to God knows where. That's the kind of thing I'm like, yes, there is a reason I think that he set this in 2016 pre-Brexit and not today, because I don't think anyone would buy it, frankly.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I get it. Yeah, well, I'm glad we could have a conversation.
It's nice
about a movie I really liked.
I know. And again, I'm glad. I think it would be interesting to see if you do get this. I will say this: if you do get this out to the After Hours Film Society in lovely downtown Downers Grove and at the Tivoli Theater, yeah, I might swing by for that, because I would like to see this on a big screen.
Yeah,
because I did watch this on a laptop, unfortunately. But yeah, I might have to give this another chance and see if, now that I know what the film is, if I'd be able to go and appreciate it on its own terms rather than the baggage that I'm bringing to it, and kind of see some of that magic that you felt about it.
Yeah, I just, I like the slice of life of it all, and the time and the patience it takes with these characters. So yeah, hopefully I'll get it to you after hours. We'll see.
Yes. All right. Well, David Fowley of Keeping It Real, thank you very much for introducing me to the works of Ken Loach. I have a feeling I'm going to look back a few years from now and be like, he's one of my favorite directors, and it started off in a weird way. But I'd be happy to have that conversation too. But yeah, what do you have coming up? What do you want to plug, sir?
Well, in May, next month I'll be back at the After Hours for, let me see, it's May. I'll be talking about Wim Wenders' Oscar-nominated film Perfect Days, and that is May 13th. And then on, let's see, the 20th, okay, that's May 13th. Yeah, and I think the following, I think after that, sometime in June, we'll be talking about The Taste of Things with Juliette Binoche.
Oh, I heard really good things about that.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Other than that, just getting ready for the Chicago Critics Film Festival next week.
Yeah, by the time this goes up this week,
There we go, this week.
in like 2 days, Friday the 3rd. Wow. I will not be able to make the opening weekend because I'll be out of town celebrating my youngest birthday.
There you go.
But I'm going to try and get into 1 or 2 screenings. So it's going on for almost a full week, and very exciting stuff. So yes, thank you for reminding me. I'm going to plug that and have tickets and information, all that stuff down below. So check it out.
Good idea.
Yes. All right. Well, till next time, whenever that is, whatever that is. Thank you, David Fowley. Thank you out there for watching. If you like this, like and subscribe. If you hated it, like and subscribe anyway, and tell us what you
Ian
liked
was wrong. Just let him know.
No, none of this. If Ian was wrong, tell me why I was wrong.
Yeah, that's right. No, if he's wrong, just tell him why.
All caps, please. Lots of exclamation points. No, all right. Well, thank you very much, sir, and take care.
Thank you. Bye.